What's up guys, it is Ali here from Backwoods Timber Creations. In this video, we are going to be putting the 3 finishes that we use most in our shop to the test and seeing how they stand up against each other. The first one that we're going to be doing is Grand Finishes, their hard wax oil. We're also going to be using Rubio Monocoats Oil Plus 2C and Ryver Epoxy's R Epoxy as an epoxy top coat. So each one of these blocks have been finished with a different finish on them. As you can see, all of the sheens are comparable. An epoxy top coat would normally be very high gloss, but we did wet sand it down to get it to be more comparable to Grand and Rubio's. So all of these finishes have their own place. We are going to try to keep this video as unbiased as possible, as we really wanted to show you what happens. We're going to be putting them each to a water test. We're going to do a ring test as well as a durability test. So we're excited to see kind of how each holds up and what happens. If you haven't worked with any of these finishes, I'll give you kind of a brief rundown and go over some pros of each one. Grand is fully food grade, very cost effective, great for a lot of different purposes. Rubio is a 2-part finish that has an accelerator and hardener component with it. Also very durable and water resistant. And this epoxy top coat will give a very sturdy and waterproof surface. We're gonna go ahead and rough up these pieces, see what happens. If you have your thoughts, we'd love to see them, kind of think about what's gonna happen, and we'll see you on the other side. The first test that we're going to do is a ring test. So what we've done is filled these glasses with some ice cold water. As it condensates on the side of the glass, it is going to leave a ring on the piece, and we want to see how the piece holds up to that ring mark. This is something that can happen on your dining table, coffee table, anytime someone leaves a wet glass on it. So initially, after taking them off, you can already see some discoloration happening. We're going to give these a wipe off and take a closer look. So this is the Grand, and as you can see, the water has wore down the finish quite a bit and discolored it. The Rubio has a slight color variation. You can see a little bit of a ring if you look closely there, but nothing like what the Grand has. But the epoxy looks next to perfect. It didn't damage it whatsoever. Now this test here, we are pouring a puddle of water onto the surface. We're gonna let it sit for a while and A, see how much it soaks in, and B, see how much the finish repels it. Now again, as you can see with the Grand, there wasn't much water to wipe off. It was damp, but it was not puddled like the other two. Now this last test that we're doing here is a bit of a durability test. So we're just gonna beat the crap out of these pieces and see how good each one holds up. So we want to test this out for scratches. With a furniture piece, they're going to get scratched up and damaged no matter what you do to them. So we want to see how well that finish holds up. We tried to use even force as much as possible with these so we could really make it a fair test. It was tough to capture on video, but as you will see, there are some obvious scratches with the Grand and the Rubio, but a lot harder to capture with the epoxy. Part of that being because of the sheen of the piece. It is a bit more high gloss, so it's going to reflect some of the light more, and it's not quite as easy to capture those finishes or those scratches on video, but they were there. Now this last test that we're doing here, we are going to write on a piece of paper with this beautiful pen you see here that our co-op student made for us last semester, and we're going to see how it dents the wood. Now we didn't find that we got a lot of damage from this test, and I think part of that is being that these pieces are a hard species, so they're not going to damage quite near as much as a lighter species would, and they're not going to indent. But if you were to do this on something like poplar or willow, it would dent it almost instantly and very noticeably. But we were glad to see that all 3 of these finishes held up well to this. So after those tests, we can confidently say that the epoxy top coat was definitely the most durable and the most waterproof, but honestly, that is kind of what we expected. With an epoxy top coat, you are fully sealing off the wood, so you're not going to have any moisture sneak in, any dust, there's going to be no twisting. However, with that comes a higher price tag, and it's much more time consuming and a bit harder to do. With the epoxy top coat, you can't really see any water ring whatsoever. There are some scratches here from when we scratched up the pieces. If we wouldn't have wet sanded this and brought the sheen down to a more matte satin sheen, and left it at a high gloss, you would be seeing those scratches much easier. So if you are doing an epoxy top coat, we definitely recommend doing some sort of wet sand or polishing to bring your sheen down a little bit. If you want us to touch more on that process, let us know. We can do a whole video on it, but that is a great way to make your piece last a bit longer and not show those imperfections quite as easily. Next up, we have our Rubio block, which did fairly well. There is a tiny discoloration here from the water ring, which again, when you pour water directly on the surface like that and let it sit, it's gonna soak in a little bit. So this is what we expected, but all in all, it did pretty well. And if you weren't looking that closely, you wouldn't even notice that it was here. As for the scratches and the imperfections, we're pretty impressed with how well it did. You can't really see them at all, again, unless you are directly looking for them. But this block did pretty good. Next, we have the Grand block. This one didn't do too hot with the water. There is quite a bit of discoloration there. From feeling it, the finish is completely wore down. But again, we expected this. And if the Rubio block didn't have the hardener mixed into the oil, it probably would have reacted fairly similar. With the scratches, the Grand did pretty well, pretty comparable to the Rubio. You can't really see them too much. It's more so just the water. So keep that in mind if you are doing a piece that you want to be very water resistant. Grand might not be the best option. However, it is fully food grade. It's a really cost-effective option, and we love it for all our charcuterie boards, serving trays. It's great for any decor pieces, if you're doing shelving, that kind of stuff that's not exposed to any water or moisture. It's a great option. So we hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let us know your thoughts. If it turned out exactly how you thought it would, let us know. If you have questions, also let us know that, and we'll see you next time.